Hello, everyone. Welcome in. Today, I saw this post on the Reckless Ben subreddit saying that it looks like Bricks and Minifigs may have changed the description for their SEO. And this was very interesting to me because just 3 weeks ago, I posted a video of some investigating that I did when it came to the franchising page of Bricks and Minifigs website. I used the Wayback Machine and I cataloged the changes that have occurred for the franchising page specifically for Bricks and Minifigs. And I did this because when reviewing the lawsuit brought by Law and Gorman against Bricks and Minifigs, the Salem franchisees, they had a claim in their lawsuit saying that essentially they bought into Bricks and Minifigs because of the relationship that Bricks and Minifigs portrayed to them that they had with the Lego store, with the Lego Corporation, and that it would essentially, based on the claims brought by Law and Gorman, their claims are that it induced them into this contract, right? And that it was a false inducement because if there was no real relationship between Bricks and Minifigs and Lego, then could that be a lie? And to be completely honest, this may not be enough. I said this in the video as well to, get them out of their contracts, just showing that maybe they did say that there was some sort of relationship with Lego. But I do believe it gives them some cards. It does put some leverage on the side of the franchisees if it is indeed true that they were, sold a bill of goods that were false. And what is very interesting about this update is, Bricks and Minifigs has been in this lawsuit with this claim about, the relationship with Lego since March 27th of this year, meaning Law and Gorman brought this lawsuit months ago, meaning that it would be, potentially okay to assume that Bricks and Minifigs has been made aware that at least one franchisee is saying that they were induced based on the name of Lego into their contract. And in the lawsuit brought by Law and Gorman, they said that it was constantly like a verbal relaying of this relationship, that essentially there'd be no paper trail, which is what made me go and look and see if their claim was true or false, because I thought if Bricks and Minifigs really was trying to use the name of Lego, maybe there would be some indication on the franchising webpage. And I can't say that there is or isn't. I can just present you guys with what I find and let you make a decision. And so with that, really quick, we will take a look at the video that I made, just the ending recap, so that you can understand, if you haven't seen that video, what I found.
Now look what happens when you search own a Lego store. Bricks and Minifigs literally outranks Lego when you Google own a Lego store. Tell me how Lego is okay with this. Now, if we take a look in the description for the Lego Certified Store search results, we see something interesting, something potentially similar to the claim made by Gorman Law in their lawsuit against Bricks and Minifigs. This search result says that Lego Certified Stores are stores owned and operated by an authorized partner that has an agreement with the Lego Group. Just like Gorman and Law are alleging Bricks and Minifigs said that they had. So let's recap. Law and Gorman decided to buy a franchise from Bricks and Minifigs. In November of 2024, their franchise was taken back by corporate. The 2 months surrounding November 2024, the franchise page of Bricks and Minifigs website says, "Start your next adventure, Bricks and Minifigs Lego franchise opportunity." Then, in February of 2025, Lego responds to Brian Mansell and claims that they have no affiliation to Bricks and Minifigs. Then, in April of 2025, Bricks and Minifigs has changes to their franchise page of their website. It now says, "Your Lego franchise adventure starts here." In April of 2026, there's an alleged dispute resolution call between Law and Gorman and Bricks and Minifigs. Then, in March of 2026, we see the biggest changes yet to come to the Bricks and Minifigs franchise page. We see the text, "Build your future with Bricks and Minifigs. Why own a Bricks and Minifigs franchise?" We also see a disclaimer that Lego is a trademark of the Lego Group of companies, which does not sponsor, authorize, or endorse the site. But if you Google own a Lego store, Bricks and Minifigs outranks the Lego store itself.
So on face value, it may not make a lot of sense or may not seem important that these changes happened. But if these changes are consistently happening on the franchisee webpage and there is a claim that there was a relationship with Lego, and those are the types of words or phrases that are appearing or disappearing or changing, that could potentially play in, in favor of the franchisees in this case, because in a lawsuit, you can use just about anything that you can find to throw at the wall, right? And that's where I think that this may not be so great for Bricks and Minifigs, but again, that's just my opinion. Now seeing this newest update is actually pretty astounding. So we're going to take a look at, when you Google Bricks and Minifigs franchise, it actually now says own a Lego resale franchise, which, just 3 weeks ago when I was making my video, it literally said own a Lego store. And as you saw in the clip, they were actually outranking the Lego store when you Google own a Lego store. And this update saying own a Lego resale franchise feels like the most accurate description for what a Bricks and Minifigs franchise actually is. It is a Lego resale franchise. It is not a Lego store, in my opinion, because I believe there are Lego stores. Lego gets to own that, that category, and they are protective of their name and their trademark. And so I found it to be very interesting that Bricks and Minifigs had the language they had all the way up until putting this disclaimer finally on their website. And then now we see it actually saying own a Lego resale franchise. I can't say, and it's very unlikely that little old me got them to change this. This is, probably them having their attorneys like review everything and cover everything with go through it with a fine-tooth comb and possibly change and fix anything that could be having them in some potential hot water. Just throwing that out there. I'm not saying it could, but maybe, just maybe, someone on their team has realized. It is slightly interesting that they've been in a lawsuit since March 27th and didn't change this until recently. And, this got exposed 3 weeks ago. But again, I'm a very small time channel. I don't pull a lot of views. I don't, I highly doubt they even saw it. But I do think it is very interesting that this is being updated, because changing it to own a Lego resale franchise, to me, it seems, like I said, more accurate as to what they are, which could potentially allow the franchisee suing them to maybe say, like, so why did it say something else before? Why didn't you just use this, this wording the entire time? And so changing it may or may not have been the best idea on Bricks and Minifigs' part as well. Just, spitballing, I'm no professional. Maybe, just maybe, it could open up that question. Like, why didn't it say this before? Why does it say it now? What was the intent behind the wording before? And what's the intent behind the wording now? I don't, I don't know if it's going to get that deep in their lawsuit, but I mean, there is a lawsuit happening. And so like any movements that either party makes is something that could potentially be brought into the record, right? And so this is a very interesting update. Either they have someone, on their team who is thinking that this is going to fix it, or they are realizing that this claim maybe is getting traction elsewhere, and people are talking about the Long Gorman lawsuit as well, not just Reckless Ben, and maybe that prompted them to say, well, maybe we could change the wording. I want to be as forgiving as possible in this, but also it is a little bit sus, right? It is a little bit odd that this timing, because again, they've been in a lawsuit for months since March with Long Gorman. So I just don't know why now it's changing, and why change it? Because yes, this seems more accurate, but also doesn't that leave Bricks and Minifigs potentially exposed as far as their previous wording? I don't know. I'm just someone who finds things and, thinks about them, maybe pulls some research together and shares them with other people so that they can make their own opinions on what's happening. So I can't really say one way or another, but this is a big difference in my opinion. putting actual resale franchise in the HTML text is much more accurate, in my opinion. And so why they're changing it, who's to say? Who knows? We don't know what's going on behind closed doors for corporate bricks and minifigs, but all we can say is things are changing. There's movement happening. And anytime there's movement happening, when someone's in a lawsuit, like I said, it could potentially become record. We don't know if Gorman's attorneys are, going to heavily focus on this claim or have, an idea of where to go with this claim. And now this happens. Who knows? Who knows what could happen with this? But I do think that this is a very big development potentially for the Law and Gorman lawsuit. And with that, I will keep an eye out for any other changes or any other big things that come through, because these changes shouldn't go unnoticed or undocumented, because they are extremely interesting, legally speaking. It's your Friday. I'll see you in the next video. Okay, bye.